The identity access management components, these components are very important, and as we mentioned before, we have important components as authentication and authorization, user management, and respiratory. We will take one by one, and we will go through each one of them. First of all, authentication. We covered the authentication concept in the first session, and for your to refresh your mind, that the authentication, it is just to confirm or to authenticate your or prove your identity, your identity. You have some important concepts you have to take in your consideration when you are thinking about authentication. We have the concept of single sign-on, and single sign-on, usually we type it as SSO, as SSO, and single sign-on, a very important concept. Usually now, my friends, we have a lot of information and systems which we are using, and this, it may require a lot of usernames and passwords. You have to memorize it. For example, you have your username and password for Gmail, you may have username and password for Hotmail, you may have your username and password for YouTube, you may have your username and password for your organization, you may have your username and password for application or service. You may have a lot of username and password. What we discovered that when we are increasing the username and passwords, this is not security issue. This is considered as security risk. Although for this it will be better, because if one password it is leaked or hacked, you will be able to access all your resources. But unfortunately, when you will have multiple username and password, this it will be against the security. Why? Because what we found that people will not be able to memorize the username and password. It's not easy. Then what I have to do, to use a single password for all my sites, whatever any password, I will use it. Or in some situation, okay, I will use a different password, but you will find that we will write it on a piece of paper and we stick it on the screen. Then when you will move in between the desks, you will find that some of the users, he is putting the user and password as a yellow sticker on the screen. This is a crisis. This is a crisis. In such a situation, I consider that the person or the security administrator, he failed in managing the security of his organization. Then usually what we are saying, okay, we'll use a single sign-on. This single sign-on, it will be a single password and it will be assigned for the user. Then when we log in using a single sign-on operating system as Windows, for example, the most popular method for single sign-on, it is Kerberos. Kerberos, this is the method of the single sign-on authentication, and it is used by the Windows operating system, by Linux, by Unix, some versions of Unix. What it will do, as you know, in your machine, when you are not asked, if you are trying to access the browser, it will never ask you for username and password or anything, even if you have a proxy server. Why? Because when you type your username and password first time, it will be cached in your PC, and if you want to access your application, then the operating system, it will provide this username and password to the authentication server. Then if you are authenticated, it will give you the permission if you are authorized to access the application, or it will drop the connection if you are not authorized to access the application. Then the point here, my friends, that the single sign-on, you must have an operating system which supports the single sign-on, or you must have an application where it can integrate multiple sort of applications as ERP, cloud services, third-party applications, which it will use a single username and password. The second concept for the authentication is the session management. Of course, session management, this means that you have two hosts or maybe host server and the client, and you have a session here. This session, you have to define some session management. For example, the timeout, one of the most important things in the security, that you will allow this connection only for 3 hours. After that, the user he have to authenticate and connect again. Some situation you may have to be disconnected if there is no traffic. If there is no traffic, which you call it idle connection. If it's idle, there is no traffic exchange between the host and the server, then for 5 minutes, for example, the connection, it should be disabled or it will be terminated. Then the connection, it will not be valid. If the user want to enable the connection again, then he have to re-authenticate. These are the session management issues. Of course, the passwords we spoke about it, and these are the important issues. Of course, in the session management, you have a different concepts and techniques how this it will work. Yani, for example, you may have the concept of the half duplex and full duplex. I don't know if you are familiar with it or not, but let's explain it very quickly. The half duplex, it is that the one of the hosts can send data only. Yani, for example, if you are connect host number 1 to host number 2, then 1 he can send to 2, or 2 can send to 1 only. But if you have full duplex, both of them can send together at the same time. Yani at the same time, 1 he can send to 2, and 2 he can send to 1. If it's a full duplex, again, this is considered as a part of the session management. We will come to another concept for the password services, and of course here password services is very important. And first of all, you must have a strong password. Your password, you know, the standard definitions that you must have 8 characters, alphanumeric, special characters, and so on. Or you can use a passphrase. Passphrase, it is some sort of password, but the password, it may be 8 characters, for example, or maybe a little bit more, but the passphrase, it will be some sentence. For example, this is my password and I don't want anyone to use it. This, it can be considered as a passphrase, and the application or the software or the operating system, it will take it and change it into virtual password. This, it can be another thing. Also, in the password service, you have to enable the self-recovery of the password. You may forget your password when you want to recover it. For example, in Yahoo or Google or Hotmail or Amazon or whatever, any other site, you forgot your password, just say, I forgot my password, then it will give you some questions or it, to answer it. If you answer the questions which are pre-configured when you create your account previously, then you will be able to recover your password, or it can send you an email with a link to make sure that you are the person which you are, the right person which he, or authorized person which he want to make these changes, then it will allow you these changes. Of course, the password services, we have a lot of things to be covered in password services. As we mentioned, the strong password service, the recovery of the password service, how you will store the passwords. Of course, this is not your responsibility. This it will be the operating system responsibility, how to recover any forgotten password. These are the concepts which should be covered under the authentication. Finally, we have the strong authentication. Strong authentication, my friend, this is very easy. This is what we call it B2FA or MFA, which we explained before. The strong authentication, this it will be 2-factor authentication or multiple factor authentication. The normal authentication, usually it will use single authentication factor, but with strong authentication, it will use dual or 2FA or two-factor authentication. Okay. The other concept, it is the authorization. The other concept is the authorization. And the authorization, this it's very important because this defines what are the permissions which you are authorized to do in your network. What are the permissions which you want to do or you are authorized to do in your network? Access some applications, some services, printers, servers, whatever the authorization. As we mentioned before, the authorization depends upon multiple scenarios. We have a lot of methods to assign authorization. You can assign it to specific individual users. Then when you define an account, then individual, you can assign him the permission, but this it's not a logic. It's very, very difficult. It's not recommended because if you have a big organization, more than 5,000 users, it's not easy to manage all these users and their permissions. Then it is highly recommended that you will define it by a rule. And as we mentioned, if you have a specific user rule. For example, here the finance department, for example, we mentioned that you will have the manager. You may have also another role as supervisor. Under these people, you may have the accountant, and these are the roles which you may have in this organization. Then this means that you have to create one. It will be considered as one role. This rule number 2, this rule number 3. You have to give permission for this one, and the appropriate permission for supervisor, appropriate permission for managers. And by the way, when you are creating the new user, then you have to define him as a part of one of these rules, and it will be very easy to assign permission. Because this exercise, it will be done once. You have to make a proper authentication and proper, sorry, not authentication, I mean proper design for your organization. You have to understand the architecture of your organization and the organization chart. What are the roles, how many roles, what are the permissions, and applications should be accessed by each one of these roles. And you have to define it very clear from scratch. This, of course, it depends upon the design of the application, and when it's ready, you can create the user and make them as a part of this. Also, instead of doing as a role, you can do it by a different thing. For example, which we call it attribute-based. Attribute-based, what is attribute-based? You know that when you will have any authentication systems, authentication authorization, it consists of a lot of information about the account. It has the username, full name, the password, of course, the email, the department, the branch, the floor, the building name, office number. There are a lot of information. You can utilize some of these attributes, this information called attributes. You can utilize these attributes. For example, if you are located in, you have offices in 2 different locations, one in Egypt, for example, and another one you have it in Saudi Arabia, then you can say that whatever employee from Saudi Arabia, they can access application number X, and whatever any user from Egypt, they can access application Y. For example, this it depends upon attribute. Of course, it's not only rule. Rule, it is one of these attributes, but as a general, you can use attributes. It can be location, it can be building name, it can be building number, it can be office number, it can be whatever any attributes. And even to make life easy, you will find all the operating systems as Windows, Linux, Unix, they are providing you some customized attributes which you can add its name and whatever its value, where it will make life easy for you to assign permissions. Okay. The user management. Now, we mentioned that it is very important in the identity access management that you have an application which it will enable you or help you to automation of creating the account, to assign the permissions, to handle the permissions if the employee is terminated or he is moved from one section to another section or one division to another division and so on. We have during the operation some tasks for this user management. It may be a delegated administration. You want to delegate administration for some users. For example, suppose that you have an organization, it has 50,000 users. Of course, it's very difficult that you will be able to manage all these users as a single administrator. Then you will say, okay, these 50 users may be located in 5 locations, and each location I will delegate him the administration of the users who are reside in these areas. When this means that everyone he will virtually or approximately he will manage 10,000 users, or you may split it into more groups, and these groups it will be managed. Instead of making this by department, you can make it by by location. You can make it by department for financial, for service, for help desk, for security, for IT, for sales, whatever. The other thing, provision. As we mentioned, provision, it's very important how you can create your account. Creation account is very important. Creation an account is very important because this is the responsibility of the HR. You remember when we mentioned the explanation of IAM automation, we said that if you are a new employee, you have to go to HR, you have to provide your papers, your certification, everything about yourself. Then you have to make a screening and make sure that you are authorized and you are clean. Then you will be able to be hired. Suppose that you are an external partner. You are not a company employee, but you are external partner or third-party partner, and you want to work for the company for 1 year or 2 years. Then this means that you have to provide your passport copy, you have to provide your contract between your organization or your company and the organization where we want to create an account for you, and we have to make sure that you are authorized and you are authorized from your company to represent them in the organization and so on. Then provisioning, it's very important even for internal or external users, and you have to make it very careful. Self-service, of course, in self-service, not all services, it should be assigned to user to make self-service. Self-service, okay, to change password, this, okay, you have to assign it to him because you want to change his password, to change his address, mobile number, okay. But for example, he is not authorized to change his job title because job title is of the job title, he will be assigned some roles and permissions. But the self-service, it will be some attributes which you will allow the users to make the changes, uncontrolled changes. He can define his address, mobile number, email, whatever, any information which it will be. Okay, user and role management. In user and role management and password management as well, as we explained before, you have to define the user, you have to define which role he is representing, you have to assign him the permissions, and of course this permission will be assigned to the role, and this will be very important because this will be minimize the errors which are created due to the bad administration, or if the authorization permissions are not reviewed and so on. Finally, the password management and how to make the password management that you have to define username, the strong password. You must have your application, which it will monitor the password to tell him it is strong or not. And if it's not strong, then it will not accept it. As in Windows, for example, in Windows, they are telling you it must be alphanumeric, it must have special character, for example. Then if it's not strong, then it will not be accepted. It should be valid for a specific time after number of specific days based on your security policy. It should be disabled, and he must have the permission to change it. If he did not change it, then it should be disabled, because you want to make sure that even if there is a hacker, he was able to access it, then he will not be able to use it for a long time, because you force him to change his password after a specific time. Okay. For the central user respiratory, this is the last component in the IAM, and it is the most important component for the IAM, my friends, because it will have the username and password and a list of all the attributes. It will have the list of all the attributes. Then this it represents as the Active Directory, for example, or the X500 standards, LDAP standards, X500 standard structure. Then it have the username, we have the passwords, we have the attributes, and based on this information, you are authenticated and you are authorized and so on. It is very important to have data synchronization between multiple servers. Then if you have a large number of users and we are trying to access a single server or two servers, it may represent a bottleneck. It will be very slow. You have to make data synchronization. You have to allow the data synchronization for both of them. This it will make life very easy, and the response it will be very high, especially if you have any problem with one of these servers and the server is down, then the user will not be affected, because you are replicating the data and you are synchronizing the data from one server to another, and it will be better if you are able to replicate it from one location to another. This means that even if the production side is down, it will not be affected, because the second one, it will take over and it will be active. And this is what we call it the redundancy or the data backup. When you can do it online, where the data it will be replicated, or it can be redundancy as a data backup. If it's down, it will take, for example, 3 hours, 6 hours till you are able to recover the data. And when you recover the data, a user will be able to. Any questions? Do you have any questions, my friends?